I saw it. Like I went down a rabbit hole with running numbers on this thing and was like, said my client didn't respond for an hour. I'm like, I have to call you. Like, I'm too excited about this deal. We have to go at first thing tomorrow morning and see it. And I want you to hopefully you see what I see on this. And it was a no-brainer. A plus B equals C, you know? So it's about finding those deals, right, that make sense and then moving forward with them. And every once in a while, you will find deals that you get really, really excited about, regardless of what market you're in, what market cycle you're in. Experienced investors are able to see the have the vision to see those sort of things.
Hey, what's up, all my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate podcast, where I'd like to welcome you to our platform where we dive into rental properties, real estate, and in my opinion, the best investing asset class above all others, multifamily properties. Ladies and gentlemen, today our guest is the managing broker of Second City Real Estate, the premier brokerage firm for investors by investors. She's been a landlord since 2011 and has worked on hundreds of investors in the Chicagoland area. She's also the co-founder of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit and the CEO of ChicagoBrie, teaching real estate agents how to work with investor clients. Unlike other events, there's a no pitch policy at the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, which means there will be no pressure and a no gimmicks environment. This two-day summit features panel discussions, professional presentations, breakout sessions, and organized networking events to connect you organically with others, learn top-level strategies, then launch your journey with focus and determination to grow your real estate portfolio. She is also a real estate agent coach, teaching agents how to work with investor clients. Through her extensive experience as an investor and working with investors, she teaches you how to understand the real estate investor mindset. Her courses outline how to find investors, speak their language, analyze properties, and close deals. Also, her other passion is to travel. And in the past few years, she has been to Albania, Costa Rica, Croatia, Colombia, England, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Macedonia, Morocco, Portugal, Scotland, Serbia, Spain, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Thailand, and of course, the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you to the show platform, Brie Schmidt. Brie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me and that amazing introduction.
Well, thank you. The amazing introduction is all about you, so I guess you're amazing.
I try to be, try my best.
So, Brie, we've found each other on Bigger Pockets, and we've seen each other in a couple other spots as well. So I know a little bit about your background and your story, but for our viewers today, I'm going to kick it right off. And can you tell us a little bit about your background before you got into real estate?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a normal person, who had normal I used to be a normal person who could hold small talk conversations with people about sports and, those sort of things before I got involved with real estate. So I used to work in corporate advertising sales. Did that for almost 10 years, traveled with work, worked 60 hours a week and thought someday I was going to be a corporate executive. That was my goal in life. So right before I got married, we were planning out our life and what we were going to do and how it was going to go. And so we decided to do a house hack property, really with the intention, not of being real estate investors at all, but with the intention of eventually like deconverting it to a single family house. So we bought a 3-unit property with an FHA loan, lived in one unit, rented out the others. And then eventually, we would move a staircase or take out a wall and combine 2 of the units into one. And like this was going to be our forever home that we could just grow into. That was the plan, end all be all with real estate. What happened was a few months after we bought the property, my father was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer, and our lives got, completely flipped upside down. So we had our wedding planned, we had, our things planned, and my father ended up passing away 7 weeks after our wedding. But he died the day before he was supposed to retire. So we had his retirement party planned for that weekend. and he ended up passing away, and we ended up having to convert it to his wake. And it really like shook me to the core. He was 60 years old, and he always talked about, after you get married, I'll retire, or after your brother finishes grad school, I'll retire. And then when I retire, like let's go to Thailand or let's go to Italy and like let's go do all this stuff. It's like he had been waiting his whole life for this golden goose of retirement, to go live his life and do these adventures and see this stuff. And then, life kicked him in the balls and he didn't have that chance. And so I sat there, as I was probably 28 years old at the time, being like, man, I've got, another 30 years till retirement. And am I going to end up the same way? Am I going to talk about always after? And with corporate, you get your crappy 2-week vacation, which is never really vacation because you're expected to work still, and you can never take the 2 weeks at the same time. So like I really had to rethink my life and what I wanted out of life. And that's where real estate investing had come in. Like I said, we had owned our property for almost a year at that point. It was pretty easy. So we decided just to buy more properties. And that's kind of what started my journey into a dork who talks about real estate 24/7.
I resonate with losing your dad. Today is the 12th anniversary of losing my dad. So
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's been August will be 12 years for me. Yeah, it's tough, but I'm in a good way. It completely shifted my life and my mindset, because had that not happened, and had he not raised me right, and taught me things, I would have continued on that path of going to work 60 hours a week, hating my job, getting to see my kids for 2 hours a day. And so I'm grateful that he awakened that in me to make me realize that I don't want to follow that same path and I need to make drastic changes in my life. And my life now is completely different than what it was back then.
yeah, my dad inspired me to take this track as well. He was a contractor, builder, built houses all his life. I just wish he would have known some of the things that I know to go to the
Of
next
course.
level and actually hold on to some of these properties instead of buy, build, sell, buy, build, sell, buy, build, sell. So here you are, marketing, advertising, which ironically is my background as well. I worked for Fidelity Investments in the agency, but that was a long life ago. So here you are, you're working the corporate world. What was that trigger? What was that switch that said, hey, wait a minute, maybe real estate might be something that could be something here? What was that event?
So it's actually really funny. Like I said, we bought our first property in 2011. My father passed away in 2012. We ended up buying another property a few months after he passed. It was another 3-unit that we were not living in. Then we ended up about 3 months later bought another property that was a 1970s house that we renovated ourselves or hired people to renovate. And we were able to pull capital out of it and do a cash out refinance. So now we had cash to invest, and we really weren't like sure what to do or how to move forward. But I remember it was the week of Thanksgiving. So if you've ever worked in corporate, the week of Thanksgiving is one of those throwaway weeks where you don't want to take vacation. If you're not traveling, you don't want to take vacation time and waste your PTO. But also, like, you're in the office and you're not really, like, no one else is in the office, so you're not really doing much. And I remember it was a Monday morning and I was Googling a zoning question about our house. So we had just finished the renovation and I wanted to figure out something with the zoning. So I was just Googling something and it came up with a forum on this website called Bigger Pockets. And keep in mind, like I had never talked to another investor. I had never read a book about investing. I never really thought like our plan was to just do this as a side job, buy properties on the side, keep our corporate jobs, and then around 45, 50 years old, we could pay off our rental properties, live off that income, and then we would retire early. That was the plan. And so that whole week, I got immersed in this world of real estate investors. I had no idea that there was this entire community of people that just wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about. And that's why I said in the beginning, like, I used to be a normal person. And I remember my first 30 days on Bigger Pockets, I got one of those awards. They called it the Attic Award. Like, you've logged in every single day for 30 days. I'm like, That's me. I'm completely obsessed. So after that, within 2 months, I went to a networking event for real estate investors. I ended up talking with the guy, George, who was running it. He's like, I could use some help if you want to help me. So we co-created a meetup and ran that until COVID shut it down. I then became a moderator for Bigger Pockets. Like 6 months later, they're like, hey, you're on here like every day, all day. Would you mind being a moderator for us since you're already here, checking posts? So I became a moderator for BP in 2014. And again, the whole point, the whole path was let's buy properties on the side and continue our corporate jobs. But I quickly started to realize like it took over my life. My entire passion was real estate. And while I had always wanted to make sure that real estate never got in the way of my corporate job, I realized that my corporate job was getting in the way of real estate. So said I found Bigger Pockets November of 2013. I left my job in June 2014. It was a very quick, you know, trajectory of I can't do this anymore. I need to quit. And I remember telling my boss that I was giving notice. And she asked me, she's like, are you doing real estate full time? And I said, yes. And she's like, I'm just so happy for you. Like, I'm happy that you found your passion and that you're going to go pursue that. And it's been almost 10 years and life is completely different.
Wow. So what a story. So while you were growing up, there were no other real, I mean, were there any other influences as you were growing up that maybe real estate was something that was this elusive, shiny ball that might be something in the future, or was it?
Oh, I've always liked real estate. So I actually got exposed to real estate when I was 17. My parents were getting divorced. I remember coming home from school one day and the realtor that was selling their house or selling our house was at the kitchen table talking to my parents. So I just kind of sat down and listened. And, my parents signed the paperwork. I ended up talking to this lady for like 2 hours. And she was very like the realtor from American Beauty. You know what I'm talking about? Power suit, really high strung, super anal. And she, we talked for like 2 hours and she told me I was 17. She's like, you're destined to be in real estate. I was like, really? Like that sounds cool. So I couldn't get licensed in my state till I turned 21. So I worked at Costco actually for years. Took my classes when I was 20. I worked for her on Sundays for a few hours, helping out with like marketing and stuff, and like left my job the day I turned 21 to get when I was licensed to go do real estate full time. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I lasted less than 9 months as an agent before I ended up moving to the city and going into ad sales. But I struggled. Not only was I a 21-year-old trying to get people to trust them on the biggest purchase of their life, but I didn't realize it back then, but I see it now. Like I also couldn't communicate with them. Like I remember showing a client a couple of houses and then I went home and I broke down like their cost per square footage and what improvements they could make to increase their value. And all they thought about was like paint colors and how it made them feel. Like the house didn't feel right. So we just were in a disconnect of communication. I was talking hard metrics and they were talking feelings. And I would just like smile and nod and, just go right over my head. Like, I don't really care how you feel. This is a terrible property. You're overpaying for it. But like, that it was just that communication. So for the whole time I was in corporate, I kept my license active, always as a backup plan, but never really thought I would go into real estate. I always just kept it as like, hey, if I ever get fired, right, I can use my license and go work as a leasing agent to get immediate income, or, I could always pursue this down the road. So for like 10 years, I kept my license active and just didn't use it.
So you met the real estate broker, 17 years old. She lit a fire in you. All this transpired. You got your license. You went all the way to being a realtor and then came to corporate.
Yeah.
So from
And I was
corporate,
terrible. Like I'm still terrible working. Like that's why I work with investor clients. And I said, I'm so glad I found my passion. But like when I take on retail clients, which isn't very often, it's only if they've bought investment properties from me before. So they know how I am. But like I can't take on a straight retail client to this day. And I've owned my firm for 10 years. Um, a regular homeowner, like we just don't, our communication styles just don't mix.
that's understandable. And you know your niche. So stay there where you're successful. So
Yeah.
other than this realtor who sold your folks home, was there anything else, any other inspiration, any guidance that led you down the path of real estate?
No, no. I mean, I knew I thought nothing like I thought what most Americans are taught, which is you go to school, you get a good job, you work, you put your 3%, you put your 6% in your 401k with the company match, you know, uh, you buy a house, you have kids, right? And then you just continue to work. Like that's what we were taught, and that's what I thought. I really had no idea there was this whole world focused around lifestyle design, financial freedom, and being self-employed. And it's been eye-opening. You've had to figure things out as you go, but it's all been awesome.
So you're 20 years down this journey right now.
You can say that, yeah. I mean, I've been licensed for 20 years.
Well,
Um,
I mean, that's
but
when you pulled the trigger and left corporate, but it looks like you were way
yeah,
before.
I left corporate about 10 years ago. So I've been a full-time real estate investor and agent for 10 years.
Okay, 10 years. My bad on the math.
I'm not that old. I mean,
Well, you're way younger than I am, so
yeah.
I'll take the elderly card on the map there. So, what was the big allure about real estate and specifically investment property? Why did that make sense to you?
Well, to me, like investment properties are A plus B equals C. You know, um, we always joke, buy and hold investors, it's the slow, boring way of the wealth generation. It's not a very exciting business. You buy a property, stabilize it, and then you hold it. Simple as that. So that was, I always thought as like stackable, I guess you could say. So I ended up buying properties in Chicago. Once we found bigger pockets and kind of expanded my knowledge base of investing, we also moved to the Milwaukee market, which is about an hour and a half one way from Chicago. Um, I ended up buying like 18 properties in 9 months and then took on a couple of partners and bought another 10 properties in the next 9 months. So I bought 28 properties and like 78 units in a matter of a year and a half and scaled up that business as well. So again, like for me, buy and hold investing is just, it's simple math. You find out what your buy box is, right? What's your threshold? And then you look for properties that meet that and then you buy them. I did realize later, like once I actually own properties, I hate it. I don't like managing tenants. I don't like owning the properties. So I have that all professionally managed and out of my hair.
So, wow, 28 properties in a year and a half. You're bringing on investors. How did you find these investors? Was that through Bigger Pockets as well?
Yeah, they all found me. Then I was really active on bigger packets. I've got a lot of opinions. So I was obsessed with it. So every day I was probably spending an hour replying to people's questions, giving my opinion. So two of the investors had just been kind of seeing what I was talking about, thought we resonated pretty well, and wanted to reach out and see like, hey, I've been kind of following what you've been doing. Wanted to see if there's any opportunity to invest with you. And then the other one I met when I was speaking at a conference in San Francisco. And he had same thing, it said, I've been kind of following you and watching what you're saying. And I think we have a lot in common and would like to talk to you about investing in properties together. So since I already had the scale, I already had my own properties there. I already had the boots on the ground. I already had the team. They were willing to give me capital to buy properties for us to profit together.
So I want to point out a really important observation here to all of the people who might be listening to this. You got involved, you stayed active, and you started to attract the people that you needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So by being active, you actually attracted what you needed.
Because here's the thing, like the real estate community as a whole, it sounds giant, but it's actually really small. And having run a meetup also for like 7 or 8 years, the people that show up, you knew who were the regulars, right? And the regulars were who you wanted to do business with. I can't tell you how many people came to our meetup events looking specifically to probably to sell themselves, like not to contribute to the community in general, but they were there for their own purpose and never came back, and it's one of the things that when I teach realtors how to work with investors. That's one of my paths and my plans is go to these networking events, but don't sell yourself. Your job isn't to go to these events and say, hey, I'm a realtor, I could sell you property. Your job is to go to these events and listen. right? Listen to what the investors are saying, like contribute to the community. And I tell you, if you contribute to the community, your reputation will become a person that is not just in it for themselves, and the community will respond back to that. Absolutely. So same thing, like these investors, and we had what I call a courting period. So I joke, it was a really funny story. Both the two investors that I originally met, I wasn't ready to take on investors yet. I wanted to make sure I had my business solid, that I had my systems in place before I took on anyone else's capital. So what I did was every month I would go through my reporting and I would send them an email, kind of like a synopsis of, hey, here's what happened last month, right? We acquired two new buildings. Our renovation budget was this. We're able to bump rents from X to Y. We had a tenant that moved out in the middle of the night. Here's what we're doing for turnover. I've got a tenant who's paying behind. We worked out a payment plan, but I wanted to kind of like give them like a diary essentially every month of what I did in my business, why I did it, and where my thought process was. So that when I was ready to take them on, they already knew everything about me. They knew how I handled situations. And it has been such an easy relationship because every month I just send them a report and give them the same diary notes of what happened that month. And like I might talk to these guys probably 2 or 3 times a year, tops, because they don't really have questions for me because they know where my head was at with things because they've known how I run my business myself. So it was real interesting, but it was a lot of upfront work. But when you're dealing with other people's money, it's a new level of responsibility for you. But you also want to make sure that that partnership is going to like mesh, that you have the same personality types, that you understand each other, right? Because I've seen and heard so many stories where people just get too excited to take on capital, especially when it's a one-on-one partnership. And then things go south, the partnership goes sour, and they have to dispose of these properties at a loss because they just need to sell them and get out of the partnership. So it was really important to me to establish that foundational trust and respect before just taking someone's money.
So I want to backtrack a little bit. You have this email list and you're emailing your investors, or are
Yeah,
these?
these are just two people that said they had contacted me separately within a few months of each other. So as I was buying my portfolio, I was kind of just like sending them a monthly diary of my notes, what properties I saw, why I passed on certain properties, why I bought certain properties, just so they could get to know me and my style of management and my style of running the business.
So I want to unpack that a little bit. You have
Okay.
a mailing list of two
Yeah.
for investors. Um,
Yeah, I wasn't seeking out capital. I would never planned on taking on partners or investors. These
but
were just people that they saw what I was doing and wanted to discuss options.
I really like this concept of a real estate journal. I mean, what
Yeah.
you're sharing with your investors, I mean, you're probably posting it on Bigger Pockets, or you probably have a blog or some of the other websites
No,
out there. No.
no, I didn't do it publicly, no. It was just for people that were these two guys who wanted to learn more about me and my investing and want to potentially partner with me.
So I'm taking a little rabbit hole here. Do you think there's some value to possibly grow your business by sharing that journal as a blog? Or
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what Bigger Pockets really is all about, is sharing people's journeys, our mistakes. Um, so I've done plenty of different blog posts and articles with Bigger Pockets on that things, but I never went back and posted my monthly update, but yeah, you can absolutely, like so I've invested in syndications as well. And the syndicator that I invested with, I've known for probably 7 or 8 years. And, I liked his style, right? I kind of just followed him whenever I saw an article or a podcast about him. I always took a listen. So I really wasn't ready to invest with him earlier. But then I started asking, like, hey, when you get deals across your desk, loop me in. I want to take a look. And so I invested with him about 2 years ago, maybe. Um, and like I don't ask a lot of questions. Like I feel like I already know him. I know his style. I trust his decision making. Um, he was also very open about, like, hey, we ran into this problem and here's how we handled it. And he was like public about that kind of stuff. So it made me really comfortable investing 6 figures with him in a matter of, probably from the time I told him I was interested in considering it to the time I funded, it was less than 6 months. But it wasn't a big leap for me. you know, I already trusted him. I already trusted his decision-making abilities.
So from the time you contacted him to the time you invested with him was about 6 months. What was that?
Yeah.
What was that courting period that you were stalking him? Uh, it sounds weird, but you were following him online, kind of uh, just absorbing his information. What was that time period? How long before you felt that you
Oh, 6, 7 years.
6 or 7 years? Wow. So
Yeah, like he was someone that I knew. We knew each other socially through mutual friends. Just that we'd attend conferences, some of the same conferences. But again, like I really wasn't interested or in a position to invest in syndication. Um, just that when the timing came up and I started considering syndication options, he was the first person that I went to as someone that I wanted to partner with, just based on my, listening to him for years.
Uh, the reason I asked that question, and your answer was 6 or 7 years, talking with people in family offices and stuff like that. These are, what family offices, they
Mm.
have money that they have to invest and just disperse it. And I was talking with someone on a show on one of those, and they have like a vetting period of at least 2 to 3 years where they're going to follow you and see what you're doing, see what you're doing. And then if they think that you're a fit for them, they'll reach out to you. So it's interesting that, that we have that courting period where we'll try to track someone and figure out what's going on. So I'm glad that you shared that, and I'm glad that you shared that amount of time. Um, Anything else you want to share with that story of what may got you into real estate?
No, I mean, I think that the foundation of investors, and why this community is so awesome is that it's a lifestyle decision for us. It's not a job, right? At least not the investors that I know, right? We're all mom and pop jeans and t-shirts kind of people. Um, but it's all in the goal of designing our life how we want it. And real estate is one of those few things that you could do to not only make income, but create generational wealth, but then also have like the freedom to do what you want and travel, right? And that was always a big thing for us. We like to take off at least 2 months a year to travel. And my business runs without me physically being there. And that was a real big hurdle, like emotionally and mentally to get over because I was so used to corporate where, you got a week vacation and then even that week, like you were still expected to maintain your clients and be available. And like being able to like actually shut off and go away for a month and not be available. I had to do it like in baby steps. I think our first trip was like 2 weeks, and I was like, that was awesome. And then the next one was like 3 weeks. And it's like, we could do this, my longest was 6 weeks. Um, but like being okay with letting things run on their own, right? And not being available, especially when you're, 10, 12 hours ahead. Sometimes you just can't get reached for emergency situations. Um, but yeah, travel was also like a big piece of it all for me.
Yeah, you're hitting all my buttons here. If I turn my head that way, I'm looking at the Caribbean.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, I took a page out of Brandon Turner's book when he packed up from Washington and moved to Maui. It's like, wait a minute, you can actually do this. Real
Yeah.
estate allows you that. So, and then COVID hit for us, and we were forced to figure out how to run our business remotely.
Yeah.
And then after it was like, well, why are we going back? We can live anywhere and do this now. We figured it out.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I mean, one of the good things about COVID that came out of it was the ability to do those sort of things, right? Technology, like Zoom was always there, but now it's much more appropriate to, you can just do a Zoom call. Though I hate Zoom calls. I think it's weird that like even like the most ridiculous, like, hey, let's have a chat. It's all I always get Zoom links. I'm like, I'm not doing a video call for like a 15-minute call. Like just call me on the phone like a normal person. We don't need to do video 24/7, guys. So that bothers me. But we've had to learn to put systems in place, right? Even not just with real estate investors, but corporations as well. And now it's shifted. Like I've got little kids, right? Back before, like you would never keep your kids home if they just had a cold or a sniffle, and now parents are being allowed, like, hey, my kids got a slight fever, like I need to work from home today. And like corporate jobs are now allowing that sort of thing and that sort of understanding of like, hey, we need to be flexible with people. Whereas before, like they just, you have to take PTO day and your kid's been sick 3 times in the last month. Like we need to talk about your attendance. Like that was the mindset before. And I think that's also shifted too.
Well, thank God for that.
I know it's terrible.
So I didn't know you hated Zoom calls this much. I really, really appreciate you being on the
Well,
show.
this is a bit different, but they're like I might take five or like let's say I have 5 to 7 meetings, in the mornings. Like all the time they just send me Zoom links. I'm like, we're talking, it's like a 10-minute conversation about financing. Like, why do we need to be on Zoom? Um, so I think they're stupid for normal calls,
Fair
just
enough.
call me.
So I'm going to move on here, and thank you for unpacking all that. I found a lot of nuggets in there that I learned something from every show. So thank you. So what would be, and this is a two-part question, what would be the best piece of advice you would give to a newbie starting out today? And the second half of the question is, what piece of advice, looking back on your career, would you have given yourself starting out?
That's good. So depends on what kind of what kind of aspect of real estate you want to get into, right? There's buy and hold investing, there's flipping, there's wholesaling, there's notes, there's syndications. There are so many different avenues within real estate investing that you can get into. For me personally, I think as a newer investor, it's easier to start small and then build a small portfolio of buy and hold properties and grow it from there. So one of the things that you need to understand is what kind of investor are you going to be and what kind of market are you dealing with? So that's where I think it's super important to get a investor-friendly agent, an agent that works specifically with investors because retail agents don't really work on this side of the business and aren't going to be able to guide you. But you need to understand, like, are you investing in an A market, a B market, a C market? Right? What kind of options do you have within your current area, or are you investing out of state? And then also you need to understand like what really goes into those sort of markets. So I think a lot of newer investors get hung up on cap rates and returns and don't think about like they'll just see let's say a 9% cap rate on paper. Like this is great, I'm going to buy that. What they don't understand is that a 9% cap rate on paper, A, isn't real. B, that means you're dealing with a C or D type market, and you're going to have a lot more problems that you wouldn't have dealing with an A or B type market. And so I get a lot of phone calls from out of state investors because I'm in the Chicago market and we've got, Chicago's huge. So we've got A, B, C's, and D's here. And I can't tell you over the years how many phone calls I've gotten from investors who are stuck and need help before they lose tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the story always is they bought based on a paper cap rate in an area that is at least a C market, if not a D market. And now they're running into major problems. Like I had an investor call me with a 12 unit and he had 7 units vacant for the last 9 months and couldn't find tenants. So when he was running his numbers on paper, he's like, this is great. It's a 10% cap rate. But he was running it with a 10% vacancy. And in that area, we're looking at a 40% vacancy rate because it's a really tough area. So now he's, 2 years into this deal and he's paying out of pocket for his mortgage every month. He's like, what do I do? I'm like, well, there's not much you can do besides dispose of this asset because it has to do with the location you bought, not the property you bought. And that's really going to affect your returns. And so you had unrealistic returns coming into this. So having those conversations with either local investors or an investor agent is really important to understand, what you're getting yourself into and what cap rates are realistic.
Yeah, I'm flagging in my notes here. So a newbie starting out probably doesn't even know that there's an A, B, C, D market, and they probably don't even know one location from this side of town or that side of town. So I would echo and mirror back to you that they really, really need to do the best they can to educate themselves to understand a market, understand the market cycle and location, 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 or I've heard
Yeah.
it said future location, right? Is this a
Yeah.
declining neighborhood? Is it hitting gentrification? And how do you even know that if you're starting out and you don't even know what this stuff is all about? I mean, so to unpack that a little bit further, how would you point a newbie to get information on markets or locations?
So this is what I tell my clients when they come to me if they're new investors is, expect your learning curve period, right? Your ramp up period to be about 3 to 6 months. So it is not normal for an investor to come with me to me and say, hey, we want to buy properties and then to find something quickly. That's happened maybe twice. More often than not, it takes about 3 to 6 months of asking questions and just kind of like getting to know things before you're ready to even come up with a strategy or kind of streamline what you're looking for. So during that time, I always tell my clients, like we use Redfin. Redfin's big here, which is a
Sure.
consumer facing website. It's really great for multis. That's what my area does. Is like set up alerts on Redfin, right? Use general ballpark prices, whatever areas you might be considering, and set it up to send you one daily email. And every day, commit to 20 minutes a day looking through those listings. And I tell you in the beginning, like you're just clicking through pictures, like, well, I don't really know what I'm looking at, right? But like after like, you do this every single day for like 2, 3 months, you'll start to notice things and like you internalize the information. So you'll see a property come up and be like, wow, that looks like it's priced really high, or those rents seem really low. Like just by, and then that helps you establish a baseline more than me just telling you what I know and you having to believe my experiences, right? So that's my job as an agent is to educate you to the point where you are comfortable making this decision on your own. I will not talk you into a property. I will not tell you what to do. And if you're up at night worried, like, is this the right decision for me? Or, what happens if we can't rent this out? Then I can't afford this. Like, then it's not the right property for you. Like, at some point, I've been doing this now for 10 years. I'm working with investors for 10 years. At some point, like, it will click for you. The property will, it's A plus B equals C. You will see a property, it will make complete sense. And you're like, this is the one. So I actually just had this happen last week. I had this client, he's looking for a renovation job. We went and saw this property maybe like 6 weeks ago. It was a 3 flat in the front building. It was a duplex coach house. It had like questions with zoning, like, is it a 4 unit? Could we convert it to a 5? It needed a lot of work. It had a funky layout. We talked for probably 20 hours on this property, going through different numbers, budget scenarios, talking with architects. At the end of the day, I'm like, listen, like I will support you in your decision, right? My job here is to, play devil's advocate, right? Find you information, point you to resources, but I'm not making the decision for you, right? This is not a house I would pursue. And here's like the 3 reasons why I don't see it with this deal, because I think there's so much complication when it comes to this deal that you're not going to know until we get into it. So this deal is A plus B equals could be C, but if not, we're going to have to go D and then maybe E. It, I'm not like, I will support you, but I'm not encouraging you to offer on this house. So then on Thursday, a property came across my desk. I started digging into it. It was it's already been gutted. It already has plans and permits on it. I started digging into it, kind of running some pencil numbers, ran some comps. I remember like sending it over to my client because I was like, this is for him. This is the house that he is going to buy. And he didn't respond to my email for an hour. And so I had to call him. I'm like, listen, I'm too excited about this. Have you seen my email? And he was like, no. I'm like, you got to stop what you're doing. Please look at this email I just sent you with my numbers. If you think what I'm thinking, like, we need to go see this tomorrow morning. And so we did 8 o'clock in the morning. We walked the property, nothing like mold, first thing in the morning. We won under contract for it yesterday and we're closing in 3 weeks. And like, I knew what he wanted, right? And like I had the vision for it, and this property made sense for him.
Perfect. Perfect. Oh man, I'm so glad he opened that email.
Oh, I would have stalked him till he did.
I
You
love,
know.
it's that tenacity that you really need in real estate as well. You can't kind of be passive and hope things work. Hopium don't work. I want to shift to the other side of that question. You've seen where you started, what you've had to do, and where you are now. What advice would you have given yourself if you could have gone back in the time machine?
I would have started earlier. Um, you know, I definitely would have started earlier. But I think, it's interesting. I'm 40, and I remember being in my mid 20s thinking like I knew everything, right? I knew where I was going in life. I knew how to get there. I knew I had my plan, right? I was, I knew everything. I was 25. And now looking back, it's a joke. I knew nothing. And I'm so glad I waited to do things later in life. Like I had my first child at 36 and my second child at 38. Like I'm so glad I did not have children in my 20s because I wouldn't be able to teach them or guide them right into the way that I want to now. And I don't think I would have learned all the things that I learned by making mistakes in my 20s had I had small children to support. And I probably would have still been in that corporate job because it would have been very scary to leave a very steady income, to leave a six-figure job, to jump head first into something where you might not get paid for 6 months. Like as an agent, especially in the Chicago market, our market is very like spring, summer heavy. So it's not uncommon to not get paid for 6 months. Even in the real estate investing world, right? You could have, when it rains, it pours, unfortunately. You could have, I've had 3 furnaces this year alone, like in the month of November, in like a 2 week period. I had 3 furnaces go out. If I wasn't well capitalized to handle those things, right, then that could put you in a hole financially. So I would have started earlier. I wish my parents had that mindset or at least started planting seeds in my head earlier, which is absolutely what I'm doing with my children. Um, to go on that path of entrepreneurship. But also, like as a new person, so I didn't read any books. I represented myself on the property. I got very, very lucky that I bought at a time. I bought in 2011 when the market was still down. Had I not, I could have made very expensive mistakes. And that's something that I run into a lot with clients who come to me to sell their properties, is they worked with an agent, they weren't investor agents. So they're now in a situation, 3, 4, 5 years later where they want to move out of the property and do something else, but the property won't cash flow,
Yeah.
and they bought it wrong, right? They bought a property that would have never cash flowed from day one. And so now they're coming to me to sell a property that also will not cash flow. And it kind of creates a tricky situation. Had they known up front and had realistic expectations, they may or may not have bought that property or pursued that path.
Hmm. Which is a really good segue to our next question. We're going to talk about some deals that you've done. So I'm going to ask you, what was the best deal you'd ever done? What type of property was it? How did you find it? And how did you finance it?
The best deal I ever done was probably my third property, which was a single family flip. Well, it was a live-in flip for strategy, if you want to call it. And it was actually really funny. So we had just closed on our second 3 unit. We maybe owned the property for 3, 4 weeks, and my husband sent me an email of this property, and it was like I said, it was original 1970s, needed a full renovation, but it was in a really good area, and it was a single family house for us. And it was just him and I. We didn't have any kids. And he said, "What about this property?" I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. First of all, we do not need a 4,000 square foot single family house for the two of us. Secondly, we just bought a property like 3 weeks ago, right? And the plan is for us to live in we were living in a 3 bedroom, 1 bath apartment on the top floor of our apartment building that we had bought with an like a FHA loan. Like the plan was never to move to this, giant house and renovate it. We don't have that kind of money. So the property ended up going under contract, right? And I'm like, well, that was it. No big deal. A few weeks later, the property comes back on the market. And I remember the agent had reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is coming back in the market. Are you interested?" I'm like, "No, it's not in the cards for us right now. We can't be taking on this kind of stuff." But my husband, I'm like, let me just tell my husband. I'm like, I debated telling him or not. I'm like, let me just tell him. I'm like, "Hey, remember that property a few weeks ago that you liked? Like, it's on the back, it's coming back on the market." He's like, "We need to go see it." I'm like, "Fine. I'm 90% sure that this is a no-go, but we will go see it." And we went and saw it. And again, it clicked. The property made sense. A plus B equaled C. We ended up being one of like, I forget how many offers, 12 offers on it. It was multiple offers over asking price, but like this was our house. I knew it when we saw it. So we ended up buying it, and we didn't really have enough capital to fully renovate it. So we renovated the first floor in the basement, and had to put out like 0% interest credit card, those credit card advance checks to cover part of the renovation and pay it off later. But we ended up being able to do a substantial cash out refinance when we were done renovating. And then we used that capital to invest in the Milwaukee market. So at the end of the day, like it ended up being a great property for us. We sold it a couple years later. We actually turned it into Airbnb for a few years too. Um, so that was probably my best deal, but it was completely accidental and not part of our plan. But I'm a big like I'm a big believer of planning, right? You should have general plans. But when people always ask me like, oh, what's your 3 year, 5 year goal? My answer is always, I don't have one, right? I know what I want. I know what I like. And if I see it, I'll buy it. And if it takes me 2 years to find something that I like, then I don't buy it. Simple as that. So there is no like, I don't have an aggressive plan of like, we need to buy this many properties this year or whatever. It's, I know what I like. I know what makes sense. And I'll move forward if I find something that does that for me.
Okay. And I may have got this from a different property you were talking about, but did you house hack this one, or was this just a
This is like,
renovation?
yeah,
You
it
did
was
house
a,
hack?
we lived there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we bought it in 2013. We moved out in 2017 and kept it as an Airbnb till like 2020. And then
So
we sold it
was the house hack after you moved out or while you were living there?
before.
So
Yeah, the first one was a house hack. It was a 3 unit property with an FHA loan. And then about 2 years later is when we bought this house.
so the
And then
third
we lived and renovated it. Yeah.
so the third property, the single family live-in flip, was that a
Yeah.
house hack?
Well, I mean, a house hack is when you buy a property and live in it and usually rent out the other units. This was a single family house, so we didn't rent out any of the other units.
Okay, so you didn't like rent out a room or a bedroom or anything like
No,
that. Okay, 4,000 square feet, you know.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a 4 bedroom, 3 bath house for a couple with 2 dogs.
All right, all right. What kind of dogs?
A lab and a terrier.
Terrier. I'm a Rottweiler guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're like me, kind of scary looking, but fun to play with.
yeah,
So, all right. So last question on that was, how did you finance it? Was this traditional, creative?
yeah. No, traditional. I've never really done personally creative financing. All my stuff in Chicago has been standard conventional loans, and all my stuff in Milwaukee has been standard commercial loans. So nothing really creative about that.
So the numbers, if you're open to doing the numbers on that, what was the purchase price?
Oh God, 350,
350. And your renovations in ish?
150, and it appraised for about 800.
Damn. So 300K meat on the bone. And what was the time period from purchase to finishing the renovation?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, that was one of the lessons that I learned is how to hire and vet contractors. Um, so it really sucked to be honest. So, like we were living in our apartment building. We bought the property and the contractor told us it was about a 6 week renovation. So we were coming into spring market. We had rented out our unit of our building
Uh,
to so that someone was moving into our unit after the 6 weeks because our price was going to be ready. It became very apparent that the house was not going to be ready. So I ended up having a vacancy in our garden unit. So we moved from the third floor or the second floor down to the first floor after the 6 weeks because it was going to be like another month or two. So, but that point, like we'd already packed everything, right? So like this was, I think, spring market, maybe April, May. So we packed everything and then moved it 2 floors down. And then we're going to live there for a couple of weeks, which ended up being like 2 months. So we had like half of our house was boxes. So things like it was now becoming summer. I couldn't find my bathing suit. I wasn't going to dig through 20 boxes to find my bathing suit. It's like now I've got to go buy a new bathing suit because it's packed somewhere. So we ended up, so we started in, I want to say it was April. We didn't end up moving in until almost August. So we lived in boxes in our garden unit until then. And we were supposed to be moving in, like the guy said it was done. I remember like the night before we were moving in, we walked into the house and the whole main floor, the floors had just been polyed. So they had just sand and stained the day before and just polyed them. Like we've got movers coming in like 12 hours. Like what are we gonna do? So like luckily our whole upstairs was carpeted. So when the movers came, they had to move everything up to the top floor of our house because we couldn't walk on any of the floors. And instead we had dogs. So then our dogs ended up completely scratching the poly. So we had to redo so for a whole nother month, we couldn't even use the bottom 2 floors of our house. And we had to keep our dogs off of it while the poly, it was terrible. And then so we didn't like it took us till I think maybe September by the time we had a functioning house where we were actually able to unpack and have full use of our house. It was terrible.
So about 6 months.
Yes.
Okay, so about 6 months. From purchase to move in, 6 months. And at what point did you go to refi?
I think October.
Okay, six,
So
August.
soon after.
So within 8 months, you were cashing out, doing your
Yeah.
bit. All right, now I get to have the fun part.
You doing some math?
Yes, I am. So you were averaging 37,500 a month for 8 months. So that's 300,000 over 8 months. That's a nice kick in the pants.
Yeah. And again, and then we were able to parlay that and invest into the Milwaukee property. So that's how we funded our properties in Milwaukee, was using that cash out.
And your initial down payment on that?
Oh, I don't even remember. I think we did 20%. I don't remember.
I love this part. 6,000-ish, maybe 8,000-ish. Does that sound about right?
No. It would have been
60.
70,000.
Okay, 70,000. I missed a button. So 70,000 in plus the 150. So 220 in, and in less than a year, you made 300 out. So you got paid $80,000 to buy this property.
Yeah. Well, no, more than that.
Oh, well,
Well, our all-in was 500. So with that renovation cost, or we like of that 220, 500 of it, or of that 500, 220 was cash. And we ended up selling it for 800. So we
wow.
got all of our capital back plus 300.
So within the first year, you got all of your capital back. And
Yeah.
then when you sold it, how many years after did you sell it?
7 years after we bought it.
And after that 7 years, let's see if you got that back. Well, you're already there. Your 350 purchase minus that would have been about a 280 mortgage-ish. Did you do all your rehabs out of pocket cash?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at a mortgage of
Or
two.
credit card.
So 100 minus 280. So your walk away was just around 520, and if you took the realtor fee off that, just around 500.
Yeah. So like even the deal I was just telling you about, we're under contract for 575. It's gonna need about 475 reno. So we're all in at like a million 50. And like ARV is about 1450 on that. So they should net about $400,000 on that project.
At the closing,
Yep.
why would you not do this?
I know. I said like it was a very simple said I saw it. Like I went down a rabbit hole with running numbers on this thing and was like said my client didn't respond for an hour. I'm like, I have to call you. Like I'm too excited about this deal. We have to go at first thing tomorrow morning and see it. And I want you to hopefully you see what I see on this. And it was a no-brainer. A plus B equals C, so it's about finding those deals, right, that make sense and then moving forward with them. And every once in a while you will find deals that you get really, really excited about, regardless of what market you're in, what market cycle you're in. Experienced investors are able to have the vision to see those sort of things.
So your down payment on this was 115. That 475, if you had done a construction loan wrapped into your
Well,
mortgage.
my client is actually doing a 5% down renovation loan. So they're putting like $50,000 down. I think it's a little over maybe $55,000 down on over $1 million to acquire and renovate the property.
So about 170 down.
No, 50.
Wait, their mortgage, they're only having to put down 5%?
On the acquisition plus the renovation cost. They're able to roll it all into one loan and put 5% down,
So they're making 800% at the closing table?
pretty much. Now they're planning on holding this property. So that's the plan is that we're all in at 1,050,000.
Yep,
After we're done renovating it, they can then do a refinance
sure.
on the new ARV, which will put them around 1.4. and now they're able to refinance at an 80% down loan, right? They said there was really no capital into the deal, very minimal, and then get a 30-year fixed on it. So there is, I said, for its owner occupancy requirement. So for house hackers, right, this is a newer program. It's through Freddie, I believe. It's 5% down on acquisition plus renovations for up to 4-unit properties, where you can roll the entire acquisition cost or said acquisition renovation cost into it. So I'm actually looking at another one on Friday, which would be about a $700,000 acquisition, a $400,000 reno, and then like a 1.5 ARV. And they're able to put 5% down on the 1.1
And
and
this
then refinance later.
and this has to stay 4 units or under, so it's not commercial.
Correct.
All right. And all you have to do is live there
For 1 year.
for 1 year. So if you use this product for 5 years and jump, you'd have
Beat that.
$6 million
Yes.
worth of property.
And you can use this product up to 10 times.
So you'd be a decamillionaire.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the patience and tenacity to stick it out for 10 years.
Yeah. Now I find most people don't. So I've been doing this for investor clients for years. 2 or 3 is usually someone's max. They'll buy a property, they'll live there for a year, and then they'll do another one next year. Once they get past, like once they do it 3 times, they moved like typically 3 times in 4 years, then they're kind of tapping out, right? And they're like, you know what, I've lived next to my tenants for the last couple of years, right? I've sacrificed and saved and all this. Like now it's time to buy, our forever home. But they still have that base of A, knowledge, but B, cash flow. And then C, their tenants are paying down their mortgage now, that they can then supplement and buy a more expensive house for themselves and still feel comfortable with that payment because they've got rental income coming in from the other ones.
So 3-4 years is the pivot point. They're investors, their bills are paid by the tenants. They can take the cream off of that crop, buy their forever home, and keep investing because they know how to play the game.
Yeah.
Or you could work 40 years for corporate America. So even you said they're tapping out at 10 years, right? Who taps out at 40 years?
Well, and if you don't have a backup plan, right? If you're on that corporate ladder, right? You don't have another option.
No.
So like my client base typically is late 20s, early 30s, and they've bought and sold the Kool-Aid, right? They went to college, they got good jobs, now they're mid-level career. They've been in their career typically from, let's say, 7 to 10 years, and they realize that they were sold a pile of shit, right? This is not what they wanted out of their life. And they usually find some sort of book, podcast, whatever about real estate investing. And then they find me and want to talk to me about like, hey, I'm not looking to quit my job anytime soon, but I also realize that this is not like, I'm in my 30s. This is not what I want to do for the next 30 years of my life.
Sure.
So I want to start buying properties on the side, right? Building a portfolio so that I have options, maybe make a career shift, right? But then I've got consistent rental income coming in to help float me. I'm not just leaving a W-2 job and then starting like from scratch. So that seems to be like this huge mindset shift that we're seeing. And you said you see it a lot on social media. People are stuck with, hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans. You hear the stories of people who've been paying their student loans for 20 years and still have like another 30 years left on them, right? And they're realizing that, there's better life out there for people. And I think real estate's a very easy answer for a lot of people.
It's easy for us because the curtains have been pulled back. We've been shown the light, like you say, A plus B equals C. We get it. We know that this works. And I talk to so many people who think what we do is risky. Yeah, okay, there's risk. But for me,
I don't think it's risky at all.
Well, exactly. What I think
it's boring. It's boring and it's easy. So you buy properties, you stabilize them, and then you rent them out. To me, there's very little risk in that. And even like I said, like there's gonna be market fluctuations, right? There's absolutely going to be a downturn in market values at some point in my life. I'm 40 years old, right? That is statistical guarantee. This just happens. But that only matters to me if that's when I'm selling my properties. I can absolutely hold through a downturn.
Sure.
I don't care if my properties lose 20% of their value because I'm not selling them right now. What I do care about is when I'm going to sell them, right? That they're at the top of the market or that the market is going up. But like those things just really don't matter for a buy and hold investor. Like I don't really concern myself with those small blips, right? We're going to have a recession. There will absolutely be multiple recessions in my lifetime. That is a guarantee. Like that's just how things work. Things go up, things go down. It depends on what your long-term strategy is. Now, if you're a flipper, right, and you're that in that scenario, right, your market conditions are extremely important to you, especially if you do like the luxury, right, 6, 12 month timeline flips. Market conditions are absolutely going to make or break your business. But for buy and hold investors, like it's boring. People pay rent, you fix things,
I t-
you buy more. It's not very exciting.
well, a few things there. I tell my son all the time, boring makes money. So,
Absolutely.
and the other thing you said, there's going to be recessions. And I've been doing this 20-ish years. And in 2008, we were just packing up the truck and buying everything we could get our hands on. At that time, we were buying 30, 40, 50,000 a unit. And we cashed out at the end of COVID selling 150, 160 a unit. And now I look at sailboats and I
Yeah.
still run my business. So
Yeah.
nothing's really gone away. I still have a desk. It's just in a different spot, which I love it.
And you've got the freedom though to control your schedule and your life.
Yes. After this
You know,
podcast, I've got 3 paintings going in on the other room, and I'll be going in there because my background, illustrator, went into marketing, graphic design. Fidelity ruined me because I read that performer that day eating my tuna fish sandwich, and I realized if I drank that Kool-Aid, I'd be pushing carts at Walmart when I was 78.
yeah.
That didn't work for me. So, uh, next question. What was the biggest hurdle you've ever had to overcome as a real estate investor?
So that was when we were expanding to the Milwaukee market. I said, I'd been investing for a few years in Chicago. I had a solid base of rental properties here, but not a very big portfolio. So when we were looking at going into Milwaukee, I really struggled with financing. So on the residential side, because we were still buying residential assets. Almost all my properties are 2 to 4 unit properties. We got a couple of sixes in there, but they're mainly smaller residential assets. So I could do residential financing, but you're limited to 10.
Yes.
So I knew that we were going to be buying more than 10 properties in Milwaukee. So when we started up there, we started with commercial financing, even though it was on residential assets.
Right.
I couldn't find a lender to work with me. I remember, I didn't have a lot of contacts there. I didn't have a network there. So I would just, ask for a couple referrals on Bigger Pockets or wherever, talk to the bank and, do my little pitch. I'm an investor from Chicago. I've got this capital. I want to invest in Milwaukee. And they would just say no. No, you don't have boots on the ground here. You're not experienced in this market. You're a relatively new investor. And we don't really take on out-of-state investors who don't have a foothold already in this market. So I went through all my referrals that I was given and they all said no. So then I just started Googling banks, commercial bank Milwaukee, and started just calling up random people. And I had this whole like pitch, a pitch deck essentially with my like what I wanted to do, what my goal was, what my vision was, and just kept saying like no, 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 no. I probably got 20 no's,
Huh.
and this was over 2 weeks. Like no one, again, being out of state was a real challenge for them, a real hurdle for them to get over. I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? Like our plan is to acquire, 15, 20 properties in the next 12 months. And I can't do that if I don't have financing. And no one will even consider me because I'm not local or don't have experience in that market. So I remember I posted on LinkedIn. I posted on LinkedIn one day and said, hey, I've got the problem. Here's the general numbers of what I'm looking at. I cannot find anyone to fund me. And I remember this guy who I'd never met before, we were connected somehow, called me up on a Sunday morning and said, hey, I've got a contact for you. He's a commercial broker. He's going to charge you 2 points. But I've already run through, like you've already given me kind of like the summary of what you're buying, and he can guarantee that he can find you financing. I'm like, sweet, let's do it. you know? So I ended up giving a call this guy, Jeff, again, connection through a connection through a connection that I've never even met. He put me in touch with my banker, and I ended up funding like 21 loans with him over the next 12 months. And it, was a very, like, I got very lucky with who I got positioned with because he got me. He understood exactly what I was doing. He understood my vision, and he actually left the company like 6 months later and then gave me another contact to work with who also immediately got me. It's been 10 years, and I still talk and work with this guy 10 years later.
So you
So,
see,
this moral of the story is keep going. I got told no 20 times, and that did not phase me. I did not give up on, like, I knew what we were doing was right. I knew it had legs on it. I just needed a couple of pieces of the puzzle. And I was literally just calling up, Googling people to see who would work with me, who would take what I got, you know? And I eventually found someone.
that's so fantastic because you hit it on the head. You got to have tenacity. Don't take no for an answer, and just keep turning every stone, because you're going to find under one of those stones is going to be a diamond somewhere. And now you've got this
Absolutely.
10 years later, still working with him, wrote scores of loans with him. And probably if you called him today, he'd say, what do you got and what can we fund?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's a great story.
Thank you.
All right. So we're getting to the end of the interview here. But this has been fantastic. I want to thank you so much for opening up and giving me so much of your time, so much of your story. Um, is there a book in your investing career that had the biggest impact you as a real estate investor?
There's a few books that really impacted real estate investing in general. Um, One of the books, this is a total dorky book, but the NOLA puts out a annual tax guide for real estate investors. So it's one of the books that I give every single one of my clients to understand the financials of the business. It's a really, really easy read. But that's one of like the core books that I give to new investors to read through and understand how things are looked at from tax perspective, right? You need to understand what are repairs, what are capex, how to budget and project your numbers, right? Because this is a business. We need to run it like a business. Do you have that book?
It does ring a bell. I've got quite a few of the NOLO books. Those are the law
Yeah.
books. My favorite one from NOLO is property management and how to find really great tenants, something like
Yeah.
that. Well,
There's a lot of really good books. Um, and then the other book I really like is The One Thing.
the
That's not really a real estate book per se, but I'm really into like mindset books. And I think that's another thing that I really love and admire about real estate investors is you can't just learn and not grow. This is an ever evolving business, and it's continuing education, whether that be through learning through your mistakes or listening to podcasts or reading books. But like we're always trying to learn and self-improve. Um, and so that's like the core of the business for me and the personality that it takes to be a real estate investor. Yeah.
yeah, One Thing by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller of Keller
Yeah.
Williams.
We actually had Jay was our keynote speaker at our conference this year because I love the book so much.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Wow, we're not worthy. We're not worthy.
It was amazing.
Wow. So here you are, you're 10 years professionally on your journey. You started when corporate came back, and now you've exploded. You've got all your systems in place. You've got the conference, the summit. You're well connected. You're in bigger pockets. I mean, I'm privileged to have you here on our show as a guest. So what's next for you in real estate, and why not get started today?
Great question. I don't know what's next. Like I said, I don't have any immediate plans to do any immediate things. I really like to see, I look at properties all day, every day. And whatever comes across my desk that I feel fits right is what I'll do. So if we buy 10 properties in the next 5 years, great. If we don't buy any properties in the next 10 years or 5 years, great. It's really to me about like finding out like what I'm passionate about. Like the property or the plan of action has to speak with me. But one of the things that I'm just started and launched is a coaching business for agents to work with real estate investors. So I've been in the community for like 10 years at this point, and it's a very, very common complaint from the investor side that agents don't know what they're doing. And I've also seen it from the agent side, having to deal with agents who are like on the other side of the deal for me, who don't know what they're doing and make mistakes for their clients. So that was something that, I was quite passionate about, is like, I got to bridge that gap to not only serve my investor community that I'm so ingrained with, but also serve my agent community and try to educate them on how to understand investors, talk with investors, like, and actually find them deals. Because our business has been 100% referral based for the last 10 years because, I do a good job. I know investors, right? And I get so many, even my lender's friend is looking at an investment property and they call me like, you're the only person that they should talk with because no one knows investment properties like you do. And I'm not going to trust my best friend and their future and this investing with anyone else but you. Right. So like, I want to teach that to other people to kind of merge those two worlds a bit because I think there's a big disconnect right now. So that's what my current project is. And I'm excited about it.
So a project with passion.
Absolutely. Should
This
absolutely be passionate about what you do.
I mean,
Like,
this is going to change lives and the trajectory of people's lives, like the domino effect in the one thing.
yeah.
So you did mention you're still looking at properties and no specific plan, but I want to ask the question, and this goes back to the newbie answer, knowing the market, knowing the location, stuff like that. I'm sure you have your markets, I'm sure you have your locations, and I was just talking with an investor this morning, and he's saying, he's got investors looking at his properties and stuff like that, and they're pushing back on interest rates. But I know if I look at a deal and the numbers pencil out, I don't really care about the interest rate because at the end it pencils out. So that's not a fear factor for me. Based on the market, what you're looking for, um, interest rates, what's kind of your give and take on
Uh,
that?
Very interesting question. So, you know, it's been about almost 2 years since rates started going up. Okay. And I am an investor. I own a brokerage company. We are the largest boutique brokerage company working with investors in Chicago, plus a conference, plus a coaching business. But like the agent side of things for me is my daily fix. So say like I'm addicted to real estate. I
Sure.
told you before, I don't like owning the properties. Once I own them, like I've got no interest in dealing with tenants or their problems or that kind of thing. I have it professionally managed and I run that business. But like the agent side of things is my crack. Like I get to wake up every single day. I woke up every single day for the last 12 years and I get to run analysis on properties. And then I get paid to do it. That is my job. I get paid to talk strategy. I get paid to like solve problems and figure out like that's what I love to do. And now I get paid for it. So that is like 50% of my life right now is that agent side of things. So I've had this conversation with a ton of people, my entire client base over the last 2 years. And here's what I've got from it. About half of my clients have decided to sit on the sidelines. Half of them said, we're out. We're not going to be looking at properties currently. Rates are too high. It doesn't make sense for us. Cool. Come back to me when you've changed your mind. The other half of my clients that have still bought over the last 2 years have bought on cap rate. So they've been looking at, hey, we're going to buy on cap rate, knowing that rates eventually will go down at some point and we can refinance. So yes, the numbers are tight now with rates, but we know it is statistically impossible for our market to sustain at 8% interest over the next 20 years. It will not happen.
Sure.
So we're going to buy based on cap rate. We'll refinance later, right? And then we'll buy at a lower point of the market, hopefully, because there's a lot of people that say this is like the cheapest real estate is ever going to be in our lives. And then we've got appreciation play at it. So now that's the conversation I've had for the last year and a half with people. Things took a real big shift in like November, December, where when they started announcing that there were going to be rate cuts, buyer sentiment started to change a little bit. And I had a few people that came out of the woodworks that like had been off the table for the last, let's say, year or two and said, hey, I see rates are going down or they will be going down. Like, let's start having discussions again about what opportunities are out there. But then this weird thing, like January, same thing. January was quite dead. Typical Chicago market. Like I said, our winters suck here from Halloween until, let's say, St. Patrick's Day. I'm pretty much off. I'm off work. I don't have a lot to do. But then like something switched like end of January, and I have had more conversations with sellers in the last 6 weeks than I have in the last 2 years combined. Like it's insane how many people are reaching out to me. They're old clients that bought with me, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Like, hey, we think we might sell this year. Can we have a conversation about it? On the same point, I had this property that was off market. So it was off the market for a few months. We just relisted it last week. I had 30 showings in 24 hours. I had 80 people come see this house in a 24-hour period. I was exhausted. And I got 8 offers, 6 over asking price the next day. So like I have not been this busy as an agent in at least almost 3 years. It has been insane where I've been working from 5:30 in the morning till 7:30 at night, 7 days a week, just to not drop the ball and keep my head above water. That's not even taking on like new clients or new properties. I don't have time for that right now. I'm just trying to maintain the client base that I currently have and close out these deals because it has been that busy. But 2 months ago, crickets. I had nothing in the pipeline, not a single property under contract. I had no clients that were really like aggressively looking. And then all of a sudden, the flip switched. It was the most insane thing. And I'm hearing that across the board in other markets. My GC, I just talked to this morning, and he's like, honestly, we have not been this busy in 12 years. I don't know how long I can run my guys like this to even complete projects that we currently have on the books, let alone consider taking on any new projects.
Wow. I got to ask. So the clients are coming back.
Yeah.
When I was buying, I was cash flow because I was a buy and hold guy. I just wanted to make sure I'd be able to pay the mortgages, cover the bills, and have enough. And then we scaled it so enough was more than enough. That was all cash flow. You mentioned some of your investors are probably thinking the long hold where interest rates will go down and then they'll look like a genius because their appreciation will be there. If there was a mix between cash flow and appreciation, and I know that's how most bar brawls start, right? Because no, it's cash flow, no, it's appreciation. Where do you see your clients in that whole spectrum? Are they more cash flow? Are they more appreciation? Where do you see clients in this market right now?
So the markets that I cover in Chicago are solid Bs. We really don't deal a lot with C class, and we deal a little bit with A's, but it's mainly pretty solid B class. So we're looking at a solid 6% cap rate in my market with generally like 3 to 5% annual appreciation. That's what we can expect.
Okay.
You know, um, Nothing too risky, right? We're not looking at big plays, but we're not seeing 8% cap rates in my market. Um, and we're not seeing, huge gains in appreciation. So it's a pretty stable, consistent, slow and steady market.
So if you had to say percentage wise, at 50-50 appreciation and cash flow, or where
So
would
I would say their goal is about 70% cash flow, 30% appreciation.
okay. That's good. I'm going to keep those numbers in my head as I'm talking to other people because, it's always good for me to ask these questions. Chicago market, Massachusetts, Orlando, all the places that we're poking around our heads, good to kind of see what's going on out there.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Well, the last question I ask that's not on the list, this is always the surprise question. What question should I have asked you that I didn't ask you on this interview?
Oh, I can't think of anything really. Um, I think it's, every investor's got their story, right? And every investor's got their way of doing things and what their goals are. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no, my way isn't the right way for everyone, right? Just as I'm sure your way is. So I think, understanding like that's why I love podcasts and listening to podcasts is hearing people's stories and their way of thought. Because again, I may not agree with all of it, but I might be able to pull a nugget or two and like, oh, I really liked how they did that. And then I can implement that into my business. So, I think it was a very well-rounded, in-depth podcast.
Oh, this one? Thank you. I'm hoping you meant this one.
Of
Uh,
course.
I love this because I mean, I'm going to be going back. I've got like 4 pages of notes here. There's a lot of information that I'm going to digest after this. And I've got your one sheet with all the links and everything like that. So as I post all this on this podcast, if people go underneath, they'll be able to see how to get in touch with you, the different bio that you've sent me, all the different information. Is there any other information other than what you've sent me that you want to be on here, or how do you want people to contact you?
No, they can find me on social media. My handle across all boards is ChicagoBrie.
ChicagoBrie it is. Well, ChicagoBrie, this is Aruba Brie. I really want to thank you for your time today. This has been fantastic, and I'm going to take it to a wrap up. And I want to thank you again, Brie Schmidt, for being our guest on the Why Not Real Estate podcast. Thank you, Brie.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this is Brian Lucier from the Why Not Real Estate podcast signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.